November the 7th, 1885. It is a few minutes past 9 o'clock in the morning. One of the most momentous events in the history of Canada is about to take place. Canada as a nation has only been in existence for 18 years, since 1867. It is still a wild and empty place. Its population, scarcely 4 million, nearly all of whom live in the East, in the Maritimes. And in Quebec and Ontario, only a fraction of the size they are to attain in years to come. The rest of the country is almost completely empty, except for a postage stamp-sized Manitoba and a British Columbia of about 50,000 inhabitants. To the south is a United States which is already huge by 19th century standards. With a population of over 40 million people and the expressed aim of expanding further north into the almost uninhabited territory that separates them from their northernmost possession, Alaska. If there was one factor that enabled Canada to survive these circumstances and to unite its entire landmass from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, it was the building of the Canadian Pacific Railway. In the space of 4 years, between 1881 and 1885, the CPR constructed over 3,000 kilometers of railway track, which, when joined with various other lengths of track already in place, linked Halifax in Nova Scotia with Port Moody in British Columbia, a total distance of more than 6,400 kilometers. This was not only one of the longest railway lines ever built, but it also traversed some of the most forbidding terrain anywhere in the world. The Canadian Shield, hundreds of miles of the oldest and hardest rock on Earth, interspersed with lakes, swamps, and soft, spongy muskeg. The desert-like conditions of the prairies, ranging from the subtropical heat of summer to the Arctic temperatures of winter. And having struggled through all this, only to come slap up against the almost impenetrable barrier of the Rockies and the Selkirks. These horrendous obstacles stretched the resources of 19th century technology to the limit. Huge quantities of dynamite were used to blast a way through thousands of tons of rock. Some of the highest and longest trestle bridges ever erected were strung across mountain gorges and rivers. A variety of ingenious new gadgets were devised to speed things up. This film from the early 1900s shows railway workers using the same sort of track-laying machines and steam shovels that were employed in the 1880s. 30,000 men like these toiled on the CPR, setting down 1,600 railway ties for every kilometer of the way from Montreal to Port Moody, then nailing the steel rails to these ties with 30 million iron spikes. Gradually, the line from the east crept closer and closer to its rendezvous with the line from the west, finally joining together here at Craigellachie, in the heart of the mountains of British Columbia in November of 1885. A small group of railway workers and officials and members of their families gather to witness the driving of the last spike of all. This is, of course, a reenactment of that historic moment, staged by CP Rail 100 years later in 1985. With distinguished guests from all across the country. A new cairn has been erected to mark the spot where the final spike was driven home. The cairn contains samples of rock from every province in Canada. There is also a stone from the original Craigellachie in Scotland, after which this site is named.
For all of us who are gathered here today, there has always been a Canada. So it's pretty hard for us to imagine that only 100 years ago, there were those who thought that Canada was an improbable country with no real reason and no real means to succeed.
In all my years with Canadian Pacific, I have never passed this place without feeling a haunting sense of awe at the amount of determination, energy, and faith those early railwaymen somehow found in themselves to build a railway many had called impossible, to link a country some said had no future.
The ribbon of steel brought us together as a nation and as a people. It gave meaning and substance to the word Canada. Completion of the Transcontinental Railway realized our national dream.
Now, we come to the driving of the last spike itself, exactly as it happened 100 years ago. Each of the major figures who came to commemorate this event here at Craigellachie is played by an actor from the nearby town of Revelstoke. Major Rogers, one of the key engineers of the railway who discovered Rogers Pass through the Selkirks. Tom Wilson, the discoverer of Lake Louise. Sanford Fleming, the man who surveyed the first railway route through the mountains. It was also Sanford Fleming who found a way to save transcontinental railway passengers the trouble of having to adjust their watches at every station by dividing the world into 24 time zones, and thereby inventing standard time. William Cornelius Van Horn, the vice president of the railway, and the driving force behind this project. The Honorable Donald Smith, one of the senior directors of both the Hudson's Bay Company and the CPR. It is Donald Smith who will have the honor of driving the last spike. The spike is now being started into the railway tie. They pause for a photograph. Just as happened 100 years ago, Donald Smith has mishit the spike. He's going to try again. last spike has been driven at 9:22 a.m. on the 7th of November, 1885. The nation has been united by a ribbon of steel.